What's good, ladies and gentlemen? Today we're going to be talking about the difference between high bar squat and low bar squat and helping you identify what's the better variation for you. Now, before we start, I want to differentiate between the two to make sure we're on the same page, because effectively the only difference between the two is the placement of the barbell itself. The high bar squat is on top of the trapezius muscle. For you pre-med savvy kids, that looks like just inferior of the C7 vertebrae. Whereas the low bar squat is lower on the back, no kidding. Around the posterior delt region, a common landmark is the spine of the scapula. Scapula being the shoulder blade, spine being the horizontal protrusion of that shoulder blade. Now, because there's a different bar placement, our body effectively has to move a little bit differently. And the reason for that is, assuming we keep our balance, the center of mass has to stay somewhere near the midfoot, okay? Center of mass being somewhere between the barbell and your body weight. Now, with a low bar squat, what we see is that the ankle and the knee angle are more open and the hip angle is more closed. This is very apparent when you watch someone high bar squat and someone low bar squat. High bar squat is very upright with that torso angle, whereas with a low bar squat, you actually have to lean forward more. Now, it's well documented that full depth squats are more effective at stimulating hypertrophy and strength gains than half and quarter squats. And that's because range of motion is an important consideration with any exercise, okay? So if our knee angle is more open, that means we're going through less range of motion within that knee, of that knee joint. What's a large knee extensor muscle group? The quadriceps, which is on the anterior, the front of the leg, and is made up of 4 different muscle groups, quad meaning 4. The quadriceps are doing less work. It has to be made up for somewhere else, assuming everything else is equal. It's made up for by the posterior chain. The posterior chain referring to a group of muscles on the back side of the thigh. Specifically, in this case, we're talking about the hamstrings, which is made up of 3 muscles, the adductors on the inside of the leg, and the gluteus maximus, which makes up a large majority of the muscle belly of the butt, okay? Now, what I want to talk about is why I teach beginners high bar squatting. The reason I teach beginners high bar squatting is for 3 reasons. The first one is that a lot of people struggle with upper body mobility, just mobility in general, actually. Upper body mobility is much more difficult on a low bar squat because you have to put it lower on your back than a high bar squat. The second reason why is because keeping your center of balance for a lot of people when first learning how to squat is very difficult. And a high bar squat just feels more natural, okay? So there's a lower barrier to entry, therefore it's easier to teach. That's the second reason. The third reason why I teach it is a lot of people will sit and stand like this, shoulders forward. When your anterior, your front side is short, that effectively lengthens all the muscles on the back side and makes them weak. A lot of people don't know this, but a limiting factor of high bar squatting is upper back strength. That's why you see people fold over like a taco. Additionally, high bar squatting puts more force on your lumbar spine, which can be effective, if done properly, for strengthening your lower back. That is why I teach high bar squat. That's the third factor. Now, with all that being said, I think if you squat more than once a week, which I highly recommend that you do squat more than once a week, or you have been squatting for a while, I think it's in your best interest to switch to low bar squatting. This is something I've recently made a transition to. And there's 3 reasons why, okay? The first reason why is that you can squat, for most people, about 10% more when you make the switch. Now, if you're not a power lifter, that's not a huge deal, you don't really care, great, let's move on to point 2 and point 3. If you have prior knee or lower back issues, low bar squatting can be effective for you. Your knees are not as forward in a low bar squat, so it puts less force on the knee joint itself. And the lower back, like we said, is actually relieved. Now, this is contrary to what most people believe, but if you look at the literature, which I'll cite all of that down below in the description box, it actually relieves the lower back. And I could prove that in a very simple way is if we high bar squat, it fixes your body, your torso, in an upright position. If you squat a lot of weight on a fixed Smith machine, you will realize very soon that it is living hell for your lower back. So it can actually relieve your lower back pain and your knee pain if it is already an issue. That's the second reason. The third reason is that a lot of people are quad dominant to begin with, very quad dominant, and this can lead to issues, okay? It's not uncommon to hear of someone pulling a hamstring when running, okay? And pulling a hamstring, straining your hamstring, typically has three major causes. One, not warming up correctly. Two, your hamstrings being pre-fatigued before anything else. So essentially your hamstrings are weak, which the low bar squat can do because like we said, it puts more stress on the posterior chain. And the third reason could be because your quads are so tight, your hamstrings are pulled out of whack. Kind of how we talked about with your anterior part of your torso and your back being weak. It's the same concept. There's agonist muscles and antagonist muscle groups, and these interact with each other and they need to be in balance. And this isn't just with muscle lengths, this is with anything in life. Now, some of you may say, Michael, I don't have any existing injuries and I don't really care how much I'm lifting. I'm a bodybuilder, right? I'm worried about my quads looking huge. Now, the quads are a bigger muscle group than the hamstrings, but I would argue that if your primary focus is hypertrophy, we should do multiple squat variations. When you train your biceps, you don't just do one bicep curl, you do multiple variations. When you train your chest, you don't just do flat bench press, you do multiple variations. When you train your legs, you shouldn't just do one squat variation, you should have a variety so your training is well-rounded, so your musculature and your strength is well-rounded as well. The front squat is more, in my opinion, more effective than high bar squatting. And the reason for that is that although the shear forces are identical between a front squat and a high bar squat, the overall compressive forces within the knee joint itself are much higher on the high bar squat than the front squat. Now, some of you might be saying, okay, Michael, you know, that's great, but I can squat more high bar than I can front squat. So doesn't that mean I'll have more leg growth with the high bar squat versus the front squat? And interestingly enough, I haven't found this in the literature at all. In fact, I've actually found the exact opposite, in that when you look at muscle activity within the quadriceps between the high bar squat and the front squat, they are identical. The only difference between the two movements, besides the bar placement itself, is the amount of compressive force within the knees. So if it were up to me, if you are squatting more than once a week, I would do low bar squatting and front squatting. Now, if I had to choose one exercise for whatever reason, out of all the variations, I would choose a high bar back squat. But like I said, you should make your training well-rounded. Hopefully this video helped. If you want help with anything else, let me know. That's all I got for this video, ladies and gentlemen. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.